guests from all over the world. Uh, Today we are on the last session of the Water Impact Webinar 2021. Over this month, we have gone from international collaborations with Israel to policy, to groundwater, to surface water contamination, to the water crisis that is coming. And we have taken a whole group of topics. And today, finally, we are coming to a very, very critical topic, and the water crisis and policy of India. Today, we have two very distinguished speakers. Our first speaker, I will introduce Dr. Nilanjan Ghosh from the Observer Research Foundation. Dr. Ghosh has done pioneering work and cutting edge work in policy on water. And he's here to speak to us about the emerging water crisis, if not already existing. Dr. Ghosh, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Samuel. And let me just share the screen, especially the PPT link. Is it visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay. So before I start, let me thank Mr. Samuel and the Indus Water Institute for delivering this particular talk. In fact, after talking to Mr. Samuel, I just titled this talk as India's Water Wars. Now, the question that might often come from you, and that's a pretty obvious question, that has there at all been a water war that India has fought? Frankly speaking, India has not fought a water war. Forget India. There has not been a single water war in the history of modern civilization. At most, what we can say is there have been some skirmishes or there have been conflicts over water at various levels, but water war as such has a completely different connotation. In fact, ever since the 1940s and the 50s, when people were looking at the Middle East and the North Africa, of course, since you might have heard of the examples of Israel. I mean, one of the best examples of the world on how water or scarce water needs to be managed and governed properly, and how essentially a water scarce nation can actually think of development and progress. Possibly Israel and the Middle East and North African region happen to be the most critical example. On the other hand, the challenge that we face in here, as far as the Himalayan water system is concerned, especially in India, not only Himalayan, also the peninsular water system. But there is something very interesting about the Himalayan water system, especially when you talk about the Ganga, Brahmaputra, and the Meghna, this entire basin, because Ganges basin rather is should be classified as a sub basin under the broader GBM, or the Ganges Brahmaputra Meghna system, Meghna basin. Now, something that is critical, and this is one of the most critical challenges that is being faced in here, is not really always the issue of scarcity. But here, in fact, we introduce this development challenge in our writings as the challenge of ample water and ample poverty. Is this really a paradox in development thinking, or rather in our linear development thinking, which often relates the availability of resource with human development? Now, when I'm using the term water war, India's water war here, obviously I essentially don't really mean that the kind of war that India is fighting with its neighbors, or suppose say the kind of conflicts that are happening in fact between states, especially with the shared water resources. Of course, they are there. But there is a broader water war that is being fought, and which is apparently pretty silent, but it is there. And this war is essentially happening in India over the last, I would say, 10 to 12 years. And this is a war over water governance paradigm, a conflict which is getting escalated every day. Essentially, if we look at India's water governance paradigm, there is one thing that needs to be noted here. That one thing is that this entire water governance paradigm is largely not only influenced but designed by the European engineers, by the colonial engineering thinking. When in fact the British engineers came to India, they brought with themselves the very European engineering thinking. They were more concerned, or they were more processed, I would say, in governing, or suppose say managing the waters of their continent. And now if you look at the European rivers, how do they look at, and especially when, if you have heard of a term called hydrograph. A hydrograph is essentially the average of the flows in a one particular month, or maybe over the average of last 30 years of one particular month of a river at one particular point, one particular measuring station. So if you look at the annual hydrograph, maybe in fact from January to December, as far as the European rivers are concerned, it's more or less like a horizontal line with certain undulations, which implies that at that particular point, throughout the year, you more or less receive the same amount of water. Maybe there is some kind of a variation. But as far as the Indian subcontinent, let me use the term South Asia is concerned, we have a phenomenon called the South Asian monsoon. The southwest monsoon, and in fact also the receding monsoon which the Tamil coast receives. Now most of the hydrographs as far as the Himalayan river system, or in fact barring some of the peninsular rivers, but most of the hydrographs look like a bell-shaped curve, or statistically a normal distribution curve. That means you have the low flows during the dry months, then in fact when the monsoon comes, the curve actually goes up, that is the period of high flows, and eventually again the curve goes down. Now when the British engineers looked at such a hydrograph, the first feeling is that how could this happen? This is simply an aberration, precisely because they are more used to looking at horizontal hydrographs rather than a trough, a peak, again a trough. So what is this phenomenon all about? Why is it that you have phenomenon of droughts and a phenomenon of high flows, what they called floods? So what they thought of was that the rivers need to be trained. And this term, that you have to train the river, is something that is ubiquitous across in the entire colonial engineering discipline. And you will also find that many of the CWC engineers, the Central Water Commission engineers, using this term. You have to train the river. Can you really do that? Can you really train or tame a river? Now, what has been the impact of this training and taming the river? And why do we at all train or tame a river? We train or tame a river so that we can put it to human use, or more precisely, human economic use. So that is precisely why when we construct a dam or a barrage, the idea is that either we are going to extract the energy or the hydropower out of it, or we are going to create feeder canals and channels for irrigation to divert it to the fields. What happens henceforth? Of course, we are looking at one specific economic benefit, that is either hydropower for multi-purpose projects, it might be irrigation and drinking water or whatsoever. So what are we ignoring? We are essentially ignoring the impacts for the downstream on the economy as also on the ecosystem. One thing that in fact this paradigm kept on ignoring is the fact that the ecosystem provides human community with innumerable services. Those are called the ecosystem services. And these services are provided for free to the human community, and we essentially have cost saving because the natural ecosystem are providing us with these services. Now, it provides, suppose say if it is a forest, it essentially provides us with various provisioning services like food, fodder. If it is a river, it's providing us with fishery. It provides us, it supports the forest. On the other hand, supports the downstream ecosystem. On the other hand, it has certain regulating services. Suppose when in the process of doing so, a water body regulates the climate, It might result in microclimate regulation in and around that water body. The forest by itself helps in carbon sequestration. At the same time, there are certain supporting services, and water or a river flow essentially provides one of the most critical supporting service. And that supporting service is essentially in the form of soil formation. How does this form the soil? With the sediments that it brings with itself. And that is precisely why, in fact, in our recent writings, this was introduced by Professor Jayanto Bandyopadhyay, then Professor Jayanto and I articulated it this further in the form of calling the river flow or natural flow regime of a river as the dynamic equilibrium of WEBS, WEBS, water, energy, biodiversity, sediment. This is the dynamic equilibrium. And if this equilibrium in some way or the other is disrupted, then in fact there are problems in the entire flow regime. And if you disrupt one aspect or one direction, one side of the flow regime, you will feel the impact, in fact, on the other side of the river basin. So I will come to those examples. Just as, suppose, say, if you want to extract, when we are using the term WEBS, water, energy, biodiversity, sediment, I want to extract energy out of the flow, that is hydropower. What happens? I have constructed the project, the hydropower project. Eventually, the sediment drops upstream of the project. That impedes the entire soil formation further downstream. And there have been enough examples, including whether it's in fact in the Colorado Basin in the United States of America, in lower, especially in the lower Colorado at Mexico, or suppose say in the Ganges Basin itself, when one looks at the archipelago of the Sundarbans, that the delta starts shrinking. This also has impacts on livelihoods, in the sense the flow of the fish and various other species, that essentially gets largely impeded. This also affects the fishermen community. So when I am looking at one economic benefit and train the river to yield that economic benefit, what I am ignoring are the long-term economic benefits in the form of the ecosystem services. So let me come to this diagram. Can you see it? It's a social ecological system. Here we have a human system. We also have a natural ecosystem. Ideally, in fact, a more complicated or a complex social ecological system shows the human system being embedded in the natural ecosystem. But as far as this diagram goes, I have just simplified it for a more simplistic exposition. The human system essentially exerts certain actions in order to extract from the ecosystem, and in the process it gets certain ecosystem services in the form of the various provisioning services like fuel, fiber, food, then regulating services like water regulation, recreation, or suppose say supporting services like soil formation, etc., etc. But when your action actually impedes on the working of the structure and function of the ecosystems, eventually your ecosystem services get disrupted. The flow of the ecosystem services get disrupted. So that is why in construction of a barrage or a dam, the downstream ecosystem, as I stated, gets disrupted. Now, the new paradigm, which essentially has been prevailing in the European Union and the United States of America, doesn't treat water as a resource which only needs to be stocked and used as per human requirement. It considers water in the form of a flow of life, a flow of sediments, a flow of biodiversity, and in the process it provides flows of ecosystem services. So this flow becomes extremely important. But as far as the colonial engineering design, whose legacy is something that we have inherited, and not only inherited, we are continuing with it, despite the recent call for change from certain corners, has largely been responsible for many of the problems that we have been facing lately. Now, between the 1920s and the 1960s, in fact, if you look at the United States of America, that is the decade of dam building as far as the US is concerned. And in this entire dam building decade, they had some of the wonderful projects of the world. The best of the constructions happened. The Central Arizona project, the Tennessee Valley project, so the Hoover Dam. But at the same time, from the 1980s onwards, the United States started realizing that possibly this entire reliance only on supply side interventions through constructions is trying out to be counterproductive. The European Union also realized that from the 1960s and the 70s. So if we at all have to think about any kind of project in relation to the river, which is going to yield benefits to humans, we have to think of a longer term. In that case, we have to take an integrated approach across the basin. That means the basin becomes the unit of governance, not one particular point in a basin where from where I want to divert the water to the agricultural fields or want to extract the energy. So at certain points in time, the impacts are not felt in the short run, but impacts are felt in the longer run. So the in fact, in the lower Colorado system, in fact, in Mexico, the phenomenon that has prevailed is that because of water diversion in the United States of America to the desert areas, as also, in fact, excessive appropriation in Western US, especially during the dry spells, there was not adequate flow in the mainstream. This and the sea level is rising. This led to salinity intrusion. This also made the soil saline, and particularly paddy cultivation was no more possible out there in saline soil. It's destroyed large parts of the paddy fields in there. This typically affects livelihoods, more so because the ecosystem livelihood linkage is something that water development projects henceforth needs to look at. The same phenomenon prevails, in fact, in the drying Indian Sundarbans Delta. And one of the reasons for that happens to be the Farakka barrage. The Farakka barrage was thought of, in fact, in the ever since from the late 1960s. Remember that this was a British design, but the Britishers didn't implement that. Probably they realized that there might be some ill effects of this particular barrage. What was happening over time was, ever since the beginning of the 20th century, the Kolkata port somehow was drying up. There was huge amount of sedimentation in one of the channels, which was bringing fresh water to the Kolkata port, that is the Hooghly. And so the Farakka barrage was constructed to essentially divert water of the Ganges in West Bengal. That is a place called, there's a place called Farakka, and there was a feeder canal was constructed so that from the mainstream Ganga, the water can be diverted to the Hooghly channel. And eventually, this water is supposed to flush out the sediments and resuscitate the Kolkata port. Unfortunately, despite the fact that it became operational from 1975, but even prior to that, East Pakistan, that is today's Bangladesh, Pakistan government at that point in time opposed the project because they felt that this is going to diminish the flow of the Ganga to Bangladesh, erstwhile East Pakistan, flow of the water through the Ganges channel itself, especially the dry season flow. There are no problems as far as the monsoon is concerned. Monsoon flows are concerned. Now, from 1971, Bangladesh became independent. In 1975, the barrage becomes operational. In the initial stages, there was not much of a problem, but the problem was only with the complaints that one had been receiving from Bangladesh that the flow is declining because of this diversion. In 1996, Bangladesh and India signs the Ganges Water Agreement. And ever since that time, there hasn't been much of a problem as far as hydropolitics is concerned between the two nations, but the problem lay elsewhere. This is a combined problem of Bangladesh and India, and which has gone largely unnoticed by the policymakers and the technocracy, which is quite unfortunate. The problem is that because the stream flow during the dry season has declined, the distributaries of the Ganges, which was flowing to the delta, they have also dried up, and there is quite a bit of sedimentation. Some of these distributaries actually die during the dry season. So the delta by itself, especially the lowest point of the delta, they have not been receiving this fresh water. That is one. Second element is the flow is so less in the distributaries that they don't have the capacity to carry the sediments to those portions of the delta. Now, on the other hand, the Bay of Bengal has been rising. Sea level rise because of global warming and physical expansion, as also sea surface temperature rise. The physical expansion has been quite substantial and has accentuated over the last 20 years. Now, this has been estimated by the School of Oceanography Studies at Jadavpur University that the sea level has been rising at an alarming rate of between 4 millimeters to 6 millimeters per year over the last 20 years, in that particular range approximately. So what is happening is the fresh water flow has declined, the saline water has expanded. Naturally, as far as the creeks and the channels are concerned, the saline water is taking the place of the fresh water. And the kind of paddy that we had in Sundar, in fact, during the 1960s in Sundarbans, there used to be a very, very interesting variety of paddy. They used to call it the Hamilton variety. Now, somehow after the Green Revolution, because of the introduction of the H5E seeds, those types of paddy, those varieties are lost in that particular region. And eventually, right now, we don't have the salinity tolerant paddy. This H5E variety is simply not salinity tolerant. So the fields have somehow been, paddy fields have been destroyed, paddy cultivation has been destroyed on the one hand. On the other hand, because the sea level is rising and it is eating up on the land is not getting resuscitated because the sediment flow or the sediment that was brought down by the flow, that has also declined substantially. So the soil resuscitation or the soil formation service of the ecosystem, which is a critical ecosystem supporting service, is simply not taking place. On the other hand, the plight of the fishermen community. So on the one hand, whereas we wanted to create some economic values, we are losing out on the economic values in the form of losses in the ecosystem services at the other end. So until and unless we take a basin approach, these problems are going to be there. And somehow, as far as India is concerned, this approach is still missing. Whereas globally, if you look at US and the European Union, 5,000 projects, dams have been decommissioned when they found that the impacts on the fisheries and the broader ecosystem services are huge. So the new, what is the new type of water conflict? Is it between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, upstream and downstream only? No, the new type of water conflict has taken a different dimension. This is also a transboundary water conflict, but between sectoral boundaries. Initially, the conflict that was thought of as far as sectoral boundaries are concerned was between maybe agricultural water use and urban water use, agricultural water use and industrial water use. Now, the kind of conflict that we are having is between the human economic need and the ecosystem needs at a spatial scale across space. On the other hand, there is a temporal dimension to the conflict or time dimension to the conflict. This ecosystem makes its impact felt not in the short run, but over time. And eventually, when we lose out on the ecosystem services, we are losing out on some of the critical economic values like fishery, like other livelihoods, and suppose say the agriculture. So this is also a conflict over time between the short term and the long term. Are we going to be myopic enough to look at our short term economic demands for water, or are we going to have to be visionary enough to look at the long term sustainability concerns of the diverse ecosystem processes and services that water systems provide us with? That is why, in fact, in the United States of America, you will find that they have used the notion, the wild rivers. Wild rivers are the rivers which are free flowing and which is something that nobody is going to touch upon. And in fact, this was in 2019 that in Nature there was a paper that was published mapping world's free flowing rivers. I don't know whether anybody can give me an example of a free flowing river in India. Maybe the only stretch that I can think of is the Brahmaputra stretch starting from Sadia in Assam, which is the confluence of the Dibang, Dihang, and Lohit, where the Brahmaputra it gets the name Brahmaputra, and which flows up to Bangladesh to the Gwalando Ghat, where essentially the Brahmaputra, the Jamuna, that's the name it assumes in Bangladesh, meets the Ganges. So this is also what has emerged right now in India, is a conflict over paradigms around. I would say this is a paradigm war that is taking place. So there is a expression of dichotomy, and this expression of dichotomy is between the economic perception that water is a stock of resource. Is water only a resource, or is it that water is a flow and an integral component of the global hydrological cycle? So if we have to address such conflicts, this demands we should have the ecological knowledge for the identification and articulation of the various ecosystem services and functions. So what we have in India presently is something completely opposed to an integrated basin level approach. We have a fragmented approach. We are looking at one specific problem that we have to resuscitate this particular point, and eventually all we have to do is we essentially have to look at to resuscitate the Kolkata port and divert. We are not looking at what is going to happen at the other end of the basin. And this constructionist regime, this constructionist thinking dominates our water governance paradigm. And this is what I call arithmetic hydrology, because we are always looking at numerical figures. We have to address per capita water availability. But per capita water availability, let's face it, is going to decline over time because the population is increasing. So the only thing we look at, think about the MENA region, how essentially they managed water scarcity. The issue with India is not only with scarcity, but there are other issues. Suppose floods. When the British engineers looked at floods, especially in fact in the Himalayan system, they thought that the response to floods lies in creating embankments. And eventually, what has happened is these embankments are because they didn't understand the river by itself has its own path. Now, if suppose we have a better knowledge about terrestrial species, like you talk to any of the guys in WWF who is tracking the elephant, they will tell you that, well, the elephant follows this particular path, or they can create this kind of a deviation in and around. But as far as river is concerned, we didn't do that. We wanted the river to follow the path that we are going to decide for itself. So, but the river is not going to listen to us. And that is precisely why when we created those embankments, and eventually human properties and human settlements started being constructed over those embankments. Those embankments are getting bridged, and eventually we are saying that we have lost out on property. So the floods are damages. But our very Indic knowledge, very traditional knowledge, in fact, in the Ganges system, in the Kaveri system, they keep on telling us that people used to understand the rivers, and they used to essentially extract the maximum from the floods. How? Precisely because when these flood waters used to recede, floods were happening. Floods and droughts. They are integral components of the global eco-hydrological cycle. They're bound to happen. You cannot avoid that. So high flows, rather more scientifically, rather than calling them floods, they are essentially annual inundations caused by the high flows. So they will inundate. Once they recede, they reach behind rich alluvium, which enhanced the soil fertility. And that's what made the Gangetic Plains the rice bowl of South Asia. And what did we make out of it? We essentially created embankments with the perception of British engineering, and the embankments got breached. Eventually, people lost lives, people lost properties, and we started calling floods and disasters. Floods are associated with ecosystem services, but floods are not essentially disasters. We have made them disasters. So it is not correct to look at everything from a numeric perspective, just as this fallacy of surplus and deficit river basins, and on the basis of which the entire river interlinking is taking place. This is a problematic issue. There is nothing, in fact, you don't have a surplus river basin. How do you define a surplus river basin? Only on the basis of per capita availability? No. In that case, you are ignoring the fact that every drop of water has an ecosystem service. And there are some ludicrous claims that, well, water flowing to the sea is a wastage. Well, that is a very, very important ecosystem function. That has a very, very important ecosystem function in maintaining the entire dynamic equilibrium of webs. So there cannot be anything surplus or deficit. Neither there can be anything like transferring water from surplus and deficit river basins without understanding the ecological characteristic of the river. And here also comes the debate on environmental flows. Now, environmental flows, of course, is an Occidental concept. Eventually, it was developed by IUCN at some point in time when they defined flows as a natural flow regime, or we have to imitate the natural flow regime in some way or the other. But this should be approached through in a negotiated manner. We should have a negotiated approach in defining the environmental flows. But unfortunately, in South Asia, because of our numerical fetishism or fetishism with this phenomenon of arithmetic hydrology rather than holistic ecohydrology, what we have is that, well, leave out 20%, leave out 10% of the entire flow for environment. Who says that 10% or 20% is sufficient for the environment? And 10 or 20% is going to be this is what satisfies all the needs for maintaining the river ecosystem, and even where we, the humans, are part of the river ecosystem. So this very idea that it is a stock of resource used as per human convenience is the basis of creating this paradigm of arithmetic hydrology. And if you look at the Kaveri discourse, I'm not getting into the property rights because of lack of time. I think it might come up at any point in time. I will be asked to stop. So let me just go through this in brief. If you look at the order of the Kaveri Water Tribunal, look at the classic example of arithmetic hydrology. The total utilizable waters of the Kaveri for the states was it was on the basis of 50% dependability. God knows where they got this figure from. Maybe from some previous engineering estimate. Well, let us accept this 50% dependability. But look at the last point. Reserved 10 TMC for 10,000 10 million cubic meters for environmental protection, and 4,000 million cubic meters for inevitable escapages to the sea. I mean, how does one essentially come to this particular phenomenon? That is a very, 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 very important concern. So let me just, this is a classic example of arithmetic hydrology. Let me just go through the next slides. Some of the economic drivers I have already talked about, the reductionist engineering and the Farakka debate, which was raging. In fact, this is also responsible for the aggravating the upstream floods in Bihar because of excessive sedimentation. So there is also this interstate nature of the conflict as far as the Farakka is concerned. This is more so because uh, as far as because of the sedimentation was so large, and when there was a high flow from the Koshi, which is one of the tributaries of the Ganges, and high flow from the Ganga itself, then when these two high flows converged, then in fact the backwater effect, because of they were hitting the wall of the sediment, that created floods as far as Bihar was concerned. So what we need to have is an integrated thinking, and whose some of the tenets are that you have to treat the river as an integrated ecosystem. Water and food, they are already delinked. Water availability and food, they're already delinked in the new heterodox economics of water. Better practices can ensure more crop per drop. Now, as far as this integrated thinking is concerned, one also needs to understand the institutions. And this institution needs to be a transdisciplinary institution. One of the important components that I would also like to harp upon as far as this reductionism in water governance is concerned, water has been made to a state subject in the Indian constitution. And states keep on delineating the property rights in their own ways. And they use the water in whatever way. So that inhibits an entire basin level approach. Just as if you look at the Kaveri, I mean, Karnataka defines its property rights in its own way, and Tamil Nadu defines its property rights in its own way. So you have to look at the basin as an ecosystem, bring in transdisciplinary knowledge base, not only with engineers, but also with economists, with hydrologists, with ecologists, with social anthropologists, geographers, fluvial geomorphologists, and others. So, and you have to bring in these three pillars, the economic, social, and the environmental pillar, and think about reconciling between all the elements of efficiency, equity, and sustainability. Well, let me just put this across that the war was waged, in fact, long ago from 2004-5 against the traditional engineering thinking. But in fact, in 2016, it's the report that came out from the Mahir Committee, a 21st century institutional architecture of India's water reforms. It acknowledged that this global shift is happening. And it stated that the Central Water Commission should be dismantled, Central Groundwater Board should be dismantled, and a new National Water Commission should be formed. And when this report came to the surface, the committee's recommendations were called, they were titled as anti-developmental and anti-national. And ever since that time, the report has been placed under the carpet. But this entire paradigm war is still going because the ministry has again set up a national water policy drafting committee under Dr. Mahir Shah. The committee, of course, has been asking for my advice as well from time to time. So more importantly, what remains is that this shift from reductionism to holism, from arithmetic hydrology to holistic ecohydrology, is essentially going through some kind of what we call cognitive dissonance. But over time, we have to see at what point in time this change happens. So thank you, and extremely sorry. Let me apologize to the organizers because it was in an inertia of motion that I kept on talking. Sorry for that. I can entertain one or two questions.
Yeah. No, Dr. Ghosh, in fact, we are thankful for you to share so much insight into a fundamental problem that is not being attended to at a national level. Lots of questions have actually come because you've stirred up lots of emotions in lots of people, fortunately or unfortunately. One of the core questions is how, now that we have 5,200 dams in India, approximately that, what do you believe would be the appropriate strategy to either dismantle them or to restructure the policy towards the creation of this?
See, there are two ways of looking at this. First of all, how many dams are really effective? Now, let us look at some of the dams whose life has crossed 30 years. And essentially, the life of, as far as their contribution is concerned, probably that's negligible or there's zero contribution. It is, all these constructions have their lifetime. So why retain them after their life is over? And in fact, in 2026, the Farakka Ganges Water Agreement is again going to come up because that was a 30-year agreement. As far as the Farakka's contribution is concerned, in terms of resuscitating the Kolkata port, I think it is done. But the only thing that it still contributes is that feeder canal helps in making Kolkata water secure, precisely because it is in the dry season, precisely for not in Kolkata, large parts of non-tidal West Bengal. So one needs to go back, do a holistic ecological economic assessment. Let me stress ecological economic assessment on the basis of the kind of contribution that these projects are making and take an informed call. Here, you also have to incorporate the cost that the ecosystem is incurring, in fact, while we are continuing with these projects, and the benefits that we are getting if we continue with these projects. And then what happens if we at all get into that the kind of natural flows or efflows regime. So we have some specific models. I didn't get into them here in this presentation on how we can do this re-evaluation, because these are published work, and this has also been recommended to some of the committees.
So lots of people actually have many questions regarding this issue, and I think we'll have to organize one more talk from you to talk about what is the alternative development strategy, because the problem is something I think we all are fully conscious of it, and you've highlighted it and sort of put a spotlight on this issue. What would you advise the government to do in this age where we are talking about interlinking of rivers, where we are talking about, creating some sort of a structure, a national grid for water? Are you fundamentally against the very concept?
I am against this concept also because of the knowledge gaps. There hasn't been a single holistic assessment of interlinking of rivers. National Council for Applied Economic Research just justified the project on the basis of the irrigation benefits without looking at the cost, the ecological costs. IWMI, International Water Management Institute, essentially justified it, one particular link on the basis of that. Let me put this across a bigger cost. Let me give you an example. The interlinking has there are, of course, people keep on talking about a host of links. Let me talk of one link, in fact, the Manos Shankosh Tista Ganga linkage in the Himalayan compound. Now, if at all you divert water from Manos, which is a tributary of the Brahmaputra, which contributes to the Brahmaputra, there will be a loss of flow in the mainstream Brahmaputra, which is a transboundary river flowing into Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, the name of the Brahmaputra is Jamuna. Now I divert that water, take it to Sankosh, which is again a tributary of the Brahmaputra, to the Tista in West Bengal, which is again a tributary of the Brahmaputra, but goes to meets Brahmaputra or the Jamuna in Bangladesh, and then I take it to Ganga. What will happen? The mainstream Brahmaputra loses out on the water, and Bangladesh is not going to take that kindly. Definitely, they are going to appeal at the International Court of Justice. But since India is not a signatory to the UN Convention of non-navigational water use, so naturally India might argue otherwise. But this is going to lead to a different kind of a cost, which is the social cost of interlinking. We often tend to ignore social costs. And I talked about a host of ecological costs, economic costs. What about the social cost of conflict? Who pays for that? So if at all we are monetizing every cost, we cannot monetize every cost, but try to monetize every cost. If we look at the benefits, let us have a look at the benefits. As an economist, I would like to have a look at the benefit stream. I would like to look at the cost stream to the extent possible, and then justify your project. Secondly, what are the costs of lifting the water? What is the amount of energy that will be needed for lifting the water from, suppose, say, one system to another system, if it is at a higher altitude? Has the cost been imputed? What is the amount of flow that is needed to essentially maintain the Brahmaputra and the Gangetic dolphins? That is how, in fact, some of the conservation NGOs like IUCN or WWF will define the environmental flows or E-flows, or maintain the Hilsha, which is, as you know, I'm a Bengali. In fact, Hilsha is one of the most popular fish in here, and it also has its own cultural value. So if that draft is not maintained, we are already losing out on the Hilsha. And one of the reasons why India has become a net importer of Hilsha, rather when it was a net exporter of Hilsha, by the beginning of the millennium, we have now become a net importer of Hilsha precisely because the flow has declined as far as Ganga is concerned, and on the distributaries, and there is excessive pollution. The schools of Hilsha are moving towards Myanmar, especially in the Irrawaddy. Now, we are importing Hilsha by paying a 35% import tariff. Whereas we were, so this is a balance of payment question as well, apart from, forget the cultural issue.
No, amazing and extremely engaging talk. And I think we could go on for a lot of more time, and we would do that at a future webinar. Thank you so much for your time and for the insight that we have given. We will, of course, forward you all the questions, and we hope that we will get back to all our speakers. Thank you so much, Dr. Ghosh.
Pleasure is entirely mine.
Our next speaker is our friend, Dr. Bhupendra Pushkar from the Bombay University. And he has been deeply involved with the Mithi River rejuvenation and has been working on the same for the past couple of years. We would request Dr. Pushkar to go ahead with his talk, and we apologize for the slight overspill of time. Dr. Pushkar? Dr. Pushkar, you have to unmute yourself, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Now
can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you very clearly. Please go ahead.
So thank you, ROMIEL, for kind introduction. And it was not at all the overspill of the time, but more and more information that was gathered. That was really good. And as Dr. Ghosh has suggested many points, they are linked with my presentation, which I'll be doing now. And the last session's lecture that was there on the Bangalore city's water management, that is also, we can link it to the current session, that is Mumbai's water crisis. So when we say, let me present this. So when we are saying that Mumbai's water crisis, so this title itself seems to be a little ambiguous, because as such, there is no crisis of water in Mumbai. Mumbai city, everybody is enjoying 24/7 water supply. So where is the crisis? So first I would like to present what is the situation of Mumbai's water supply and the sea and other things. And then I'll come down to where is the crisis. And as Mr. Ghosh has suggested, there is a water war, but there is no frontline water war. There is a silent water war that is going on. Okay. So this is in line with my presentation. So Mumbai supply, these are the dimensions of the Mumbai area, and water demand is around 4,200 MLD, and supply is around 3,500 MLD. So there is a small gap of 1,000 MLD that is manageable gap. And these are the major surface reservoirs which supplies the water to Mumbai. One point that I would like to highlight here is the current supply is met by the resources which are water resources which are around in the surrounding area, like 100 kilometers away from Mumbai. So these water resources are actually, Mumbai is taking up these water resources and deprivating the local people from where these water resources are being diverted over here. And these are the water reservoirs and way ahead, like the planning of the Mumbai MCGM for making up the gap of 1,000 MLD. These are the water supply projects that is being considered and will be implemented by the MCGM for augmenting the supply of water to the Mumbai, and availability of the water from ground sources. One of the important point here is in Mumbai, since this Mumbai city is based on most of the reclaimed area, so groundwater is not suitable for drinking or any use purpose, and hence there is a strict ban on groundwater usage. But still, in spite of this, there are around 3,950 dug wells and 2,514 bore wells, and these are basically because to meet the supply of the water which is not being made by the BMC. There are also, apart from this, to make the supply, and especially in the slum area, there is informal distribution system where water treatment kiosk is installed, and they sell the water at a very high cost in 20-liter can. And slum dwellers, they are willing to pay for the clean water supply because they don't have any alternative source of water. So now next is the water charges. I would like to highlight here that since the charges are very low, so we do not really value the water, and we simply waste a lot. And there is, of course, the telescopic billing system where residential houses are charged less, and it increases depending upon the commercial value. Like commercial establishments are charged high, industrial establishments are also charged high, and bulk customers, they are charged the highest. But in spite of this, the residential house, since they are charged very less, so there is a less value. Water conservation, that idea has not inculcated into the residential. Action plan for the coming for enhancing the water supply. These are the action plan of the government to enhance the water supply, and new resource development is also being planned, which are of course not in Mumbai, but they are more than 100 kilometers away from the Mumbai. So in short, we are going to suck up more and more water to enhance the water supply of Mumbai. Now, coming on to the solution, the alternative solution to handle the water crisis. Basically, there is no water crisis, but the crisis is in the areas from where we are taking away the water. And as I mentioned in my earlier slides, that we are planning more and more river dam projects, and trying to take away water from that area. And in the recent time, there have been various demonstrations and agitations from the people of those local areas, since they know that after this dam is being built, this water will be sucked up and it will be diverted to other region, that is Mumbai. So there are many protests. Of course, they are on and off protest, but of course, if the government goes ahead with the project, the people will not have any alternative but to suffer with the water crisis. So in fact, the Mumbai's water crisis is not basically of Mumbai, but it is of the surrounding area of Mumbai from where we are taking away the water. So what can be the solutions? So these are the alternative solutions that I would like to propose here. Like when we see the typical domestic usage of the water, so we use around 5% of the water, only 5% of the water for drinking and cooking purpose, 15% for bathing, 30% for washing, 17% for gardening, and 33% for flushing. And 135 liters per capita per day is the average requirement of per person. And out of this, 70% of water is being converted to sewage. If we try to recycle this water, like only the used water, that is the gray water, not the black water, this water can be very well be used for flushing and gardening purpose. And if we try to do this, we can straight away reduce 50% demand of the water. So the current demand being 4,000 MLD, so that can be easily reduced to 2,000 MLD if we try to reuse the water. And this can be very well be used for firefighting. I mean, these are the various other uses where this water can be diverted. Now coming on to the sewage system of the Mumbai. Mumbai, of course, has a very well established sewage system. Total water supplies again to 3,500 MLD. Domestic sewage generated is around 2,700 MLD. Sewage that is collected, that is 1,700 MLD. These are the figures that I could get from the internet. Maybe sewage collection might have increased because there are more and more new projects that are being commissioned by the government for enhancing the sewage collection and sewage treatment. So sewage treatment facility is available for around 2,000 MLD. Untreated sewage goes directly through Nala into the sea, and seaward area is around 62% that is covered. Mumbai sewage system, basically, it's a very systematic sewage system that has been developed way back in 1860, and the sewage system is the sewerage zone. There are 7 sewerage zones: Kolaba, Worli, Bandra, Warsaw, Bhandup, and Ghatkopar. So in these zones, the sewage system, sewage water is being collected at a sewage treatment plant, and each sewage zone has a single water treatment plant. And the government is trying to enhance the capacity of the sewage treatment plant, as well as they are trying to install new sewage treatment plant. And there is a very good sewerage network system, that is 830 kilometers of sewerage network system in the Mumbai city to collect these sewage water so that it can be treated well, and after treatment it will be disposed into the surrounding area, into the sea. So there are 7 wastewater treatment facilities at these 7 zones. And one thing that I would like to highlight here is, in spite of a good sewage system and wastewater treatment facility that is being installed by the government, in the documents of the government and in the planning of the government that I have been searching throughout, I could not find even a single mention of reusing the sewage water or reusing the treated water. So what happens with to this treated water? This treated water is basically directly disposed of into the sea. So at this zone of Kolaba, Worli, and Bandra, it is directly disposed of into the marine outfall. And in the zone of Warsaw, Bhandup, and Ghatkopar, it is disposed of through the lagoons into the creek. And in the Malad, it is the sewage water is disposed of directly into the creeks. So these are the creeks where the sewage water is directly being disposed of, without considering that this sewage water, treated sewage water, can be reused for the secondary purposes. These are the planning of the government for upgradation of the 7 sewage treatment plant. And of course, this will take care of the total sewage that is being generated currently in the Mumbai city. Challenges, there are of course some challenges for implementation of the major projects, that is paucity of land, construction of new facility by retaining debt. So these are the, because of the paucity of the land, there are various challenges. We cannot install the new sewage treatment plant because it requires a huge area of the land to be diverted. And this is quickly the water policy of Maharashtra state government, where it mentions the supply, that we will supply the water, we will treat the sewage, but nowhere it is mentioning that we will reuse the treated sewage water. So one of the solutions that can be thought of for the water crisis, of course, in Mumbai as well as in the other part of the country also, is decentralized wastewater treatment system. As Mr. Ghosh has already suggested that the water system, basically the river or pond or lake, this is an ecological system. So we need to maintain that ecological balance of that system. So decentralized, of course, this is for the wastewater treatment. For the water conservation also, decentralized system is being promoted. So this decentralized wastewater treatment system is being developed by the international organizations and experts. These are flexible, efficient, and cost effective, and these can complementary this can be complementary to the centralized wastewater system, and it will help in reducing the overall generation of the wastewater. But more and more, this system can be made popular by educating the people about the uh, uh, treatment, wastewater treatment, and reuse of that wastewater treatment, as was highlighted in the earlier lecture last on the Tuesday. So basically, decentralized wastewater treatment, it is a very simple treatment where you have a primary treatment in a sedimentation, where in the primary treatment pond, basically the sedimentation takes place, and in the secondary treatment, the anaerobic reactors and anaerobic treatment actually takes place in the secondary system. And post-treatment, there is an aerobic polishing of the ponds, and the water can be made available for secondary purposes. So this is basically a rough diagram about decentralized wastewater treatment. Here, what we are seeing is there is sedimentation, anaerobic digestion, then anaerobic and facultative decomposition, and then there is a post-treatment. This is the photo of Warsaw treatment plant, where the water is being discharged through the lagoons into the creek. So these are the lagoons that are created where the water is being collected after it is being treated in the sewage treatment plant. So what we can see from here, that huge amount of water is available. If this water can be diverted again back for the secondary purposes, then most of the problem of the water can be resolved for the Mumbai city. This is the sewage water that is being generated in various facilities like Malad, and it is directly directed through the creek into the sea. And as you can see, this narrow creek, and these are the, such kind of creeks are available at various points, and these are the mangrove forest region, which are of course another plants which can treat the water. So now I would like to highlight the work that I have been working on, and I've been proposing this for wastewater treatment. Basically, till now, when we think of wastewater treatment, we think of a large, huge investment and a large wastewater treatment facility where the water, where the river or the channel water needs to be diverted, and the water needs to be cleaned, and again the water will be diverted again into the sea. Suppose, for example, this is a channel, and according to current assumption, if we want to treat the water in this channel, we'll have to create a treatment facility over here and pump in the water here in the treatment facility, which will utilize this huge area, and then after treatment again pump it back to this river channel, water channel. So this involves a huge investment cost and energy, and it of course has a cost on the ecological system also. So the alternative here is to treat the water inside the channel, and this is one of the systems that we have been working, and we have developed this system, and it's pretty simple system that we try to on the bank of the channel, we try to grow some plants which can treat the water. So at present, vetiver plant is the plant that we are working on, and it has shown really good results for treatment of the wastewater. So the bank of the channel can be vetiver plants can be grown on the bank of the channel, both the banks. So the roots will go deep into the water, and it will treat the water. Apart from that, we can have a green bio bridge to because hydraulic retention time is required for the water to be treated, because when we flow the water, it should be holding here for some time, which the plants and the bacteria, they will get to treat the water. So that's why this green bio bridge are being built to increase the hydraulic retention time, and these are the flow control boom, and everything is like green. I mean, these are the floating floating material into which the plants are like vetiver or other aquatic plants have been planted, and the roots of this plant, they go very deep into the water, and because of this roots, the water is being obstructed for some period of time, which will give the hydraulic retention time for the treatment of the water. And these are the micro this system consists of the treatment of water with using plants as well as microorganisms. So for charging of the microorganisms, these are the points where we can install tanks which through which we can dose the microorganisms into the channel at this different positions. So the whole system, along with the microorganisms and the plants, it will treat the water, and the barrier that is being built in this channel will help in the hydraulic retention time, and the water will be treated. So such kind of system can be built very well into the river channels, into the nalas, which are flowing nalas, open drain and open gutter, which is flowing through the Mumbai city as well as into the other cities. So this is the this is how this system looks like. Like this is a drain, that open nala that is there, and earlier this is how it was looking. And what is done here is, on this, since these are the concrete, I mean, there is one limitation that the nalas or the channels of the river which are flowing through the rivers through the cities, they have this concrete embankment, and which doesn't allow any plants to grow. So what we do is we put a coir material, coir logs over this embank, and then we implant the plant over there. So after the plants have grown, it looks like this. The whole bank becomes green, and both the sides of the bank, as you can see, it has become green, and these roots have penetrated deep inside this water, and those roots are actually working inside the water to treat the water. And apart from that, we have some floating material over here where we plant the plants, and these floating islands, these are the floating islands which also helps in growing the plants, and these plants along with the microorganisms help in cleaning the channel. So from this, the nala or the gutter can become this, and this is a real-time photo. This is another picture for stagnant water or the lake water, how it can be rejuvenated. If we have a good area where we can collect the water and make it an artificial lake, then we can install these floating islands. And here on the banks, again, we can plant the plants. So floating islands along with this plants which are planted on the bank, they help in removing, cleaning up the water. And of course, this is a good design. It will, this kind of design, if it is implemented into the water bodies, it will also help in improving the aesthetic look and increasing the tourism into such kind of area. So now I'll come down to the project that we recently completed in the Mithi River. It was a demo project to show that this Mithi River water can be cleaned. This is the photo of the Mithi River, which is surrounded by mangrove forest. And this Mithi River, basically, it has become, I mean, it's a misnomer to call it is a river, because now it is receiving all the drain water from all over the city of the Mumbai. So all the gutters are opening here, and this water is really, I mean, it's a sewage water. So what we did is we installed the floating island, which were implanted with vetiver plant, and this was installed in the river. And this system also requires an aeration system, which can be a normal fountain which can be installed. So this fountain will help in aerating the water, and this plants along with the microorganisms. Microbes are also dosed here. Plants along with the microorganisms, they clean up the water. So this was this system we installed in the river, in the Mithi River. But since this was a demo project, only one system was installed, and this small system has, I mean, it's impossible to clean up the whole river by just this small system. This was just to show, okay, how this system looked like. But what we did was we collected the Mithi River water in the tank, in the floating in the tank in which was kept in on the bank of the river, and we put our the same system replicated here in this tank with vetiver plant and the microorganisms, and along with the aeration system. And this was the result of the post treatment. You can see the water has become, this was actually the gutter water. This is, as you can see, this is sewage water. This water became very clean, and this light, you can see it can pass through up to the bottom. And these were the results that we achieved. BOD level was around 10, COD level was around 30, and dissolved oxygen, it increased from around 0 to 6 mg per liter. And this was one of the major achievements. So this is about the water treatment. And one thing I would like to mention here is when we were doing this project here in this Mithi River, we were emphasizing on the ecological restoration of this river rather than focusing on just cleaning the water. We want to restore this river, because once the river is restored ecologically, it regains its capacity to clean up the water that is coming into the river. So if we try to focus on the ecological restoration of the river, then the maintenance cost in the coming year, it reduces to up to the zero. You can take the maintenance cost up to the zero also, but because once you restore the river ecologically, then the river gets back its capacity to clean the water that is coming inside. Because as I've mentioned in my results, that dissolved oxygen was from 0 to 6. So this 6 mg per liter of the oxygen, it will support the aquatic life over here in this river. And because of this aquatic life and other systems, the river will regain slowly the ecological balance. And in such kind of system, if we try to put the untreated water, that water gets treated by the ecosystem of the river that is being maintained. So that was our idea, to restore the ecosystem of this river rather than just focusing on cleaning up of the water of this river. I think.
Pushkar, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was really insightful, and really solutions. We have to be innovative about our solutions to solve crises like the Mumbai water crisis. I'll now hand over the panel to my co-moderator, Dr. Samir Kulkarni from Bombay University, to take the questions, please.
Yes, thank you, Romil, and thank you, Dr. Pushkar. That was, quite informative in a way. I mean, I stay in Mumbai, and in fact, I'm also part of University of Mumbai, and this is honestly the first time I'm looking at Dr. Pushkar's, work through this particular, forum. And I'm actually quite delighted to see that, these sort of efforts are actually going on. Some questions which have come up, right? So one of the questions is, can we use grey water directly for gardening without any treatment? What would be the pros and cons?
We can use, of course, for gardening purpose, we can surely use grey water directly, because as the plants, these plants are not edible plants. We are not going to eat the plant, and when the water is going into the soil, the plants which are already there, because the system that I proposed is cleaning the water by using the plant. So the same work can be done by the gardener. So, if we are not going to use that water. But of course, we'll have to check the quality of the water. If there are no, because in the household also, in recently in the recent times, in the household we use various chemicals like cosmetics and other things. So they add to the chemical quality. So those chemical toxicity should be checked. Otherwise, the normal gray water can be directly used for gardening purposes.
Okay. Another question is, you know, is there no demand for the treated wastewater from the industries? And also, like, I think it's more or less a similar question like earlier. Particularly, has it been attempted for irrigating public parks or cricket grounds?
In Mumbai, basically, I mean, what I found, I went through all the documents. There are no examples because one of the thing is that we are supplying the water at a low cost. So when the industry is getting the water at suppose 40 rupees per 1,000 liters, so why will they go for such kind of other alternatives? They already have a good supply. So industry, I mean, if the water costing, we increase the water costing for industry, and then we give the alternative. Of course, they will do that thing. But the water pricing is basically uh, one of the thing that is hampering such kind of reuse of the water.
Okay. Uh, then other question is like, I don't think this is a question. It's more, I think, a comment. The floating tanks are being made with geomembrane as per IS 15351, and apparently Gujarat Craft Industries Limited is the manufacturer of this product. So thank you very much. This was information shared by Mr. Anup Chandra. Uh, and there's one question here. So the water losses, both real losses and non-revenue water, is quite high in Mumbai, about 40 to 50%. It might be good to focus on reducing water losses. Any thoughts about on that?
Yes, of course. That is what I propose in that decentralized wastewater treatment system. So this kind of decentralized wastewater system can be installed in each society, or a group of society can install such kind of decentralized wastewater treatment. Because once we want, if suppose we have commissioned a wastewater treatment plant at around 10 kilometers away from the source of the water. So in that, transportation cost is also there, and some water of course gets lost in that. So decentralized wastewater treatment is very much feasible because it requires less space and it can be very well be done. But for this, of course, some education, I mean, educating the society about the value of the water is required, because in city like Mumbai, of course, and people will laugh if I say okay, there is a water crisis in Mumbai. So there is a need for for educating the people. Okay, we are taking up the water uh, from the surrounding villages, and they are being deprived of water for their irrigation purpose and for their daily livelihood purpose.
Another, I think you have already, in a way answered this particular question. The question actually, next question was, do you think this technology can be localized for society
Yeah,
or
it,
at
it
individual
can very
society?
well be localized for the society.
Yeah.
5,000. I mean, the tank which I shown in my presentation, that was 5,000 liter tank. Such kind of flexible tank can be installed in society if they don't have much space, and the gray water can directly can be collected and can be cleaned. And one another thing that can be suggested here is, if you, even if you don't clean the water, just collect the water in such kind of a flexible tank and then use it for your flushing. So it will just require, I mean, of course, initial investment will be there to have a separate pipeline for the flushing system, but this can be very well be done, and the flushing water can be reduced.
Okay. And Yeah, even I had this particular question. What are the main plants that have been used for Viti River's cleaning or capacity restoration?
Basically, for cleaning up the water, we focus on aquatic plants. And out of the various aquatic plants that we worked on, vetiver was found to be much sturdy and much suitable because it grows readily um, in in presence of various kinds of chemicals. As you've seen that vetiver plant were able to grow in the Mithi River. That was our major challenge because Mithi River water is actually a toxic water. If you do the analysis, sorry, if you do the water analysis, there are many heavy metals, many toxic components which are present in the water, in the material water. Apart from that, it has a high salinity water. So the major challenge for us was to make the plant grow in that kind of toxic environment, and which was, of course, we could succeed in that. So basically, we need to seek what kind of toxic components are present in the water, and according to that we can select the water, select the plant. And vetiver is found for, I mean, for us, we found it very much suitable. Apart from vetiver plant being easily be able to grow, another thing is the vetiver plant has a rooting system, very well fibrous rooting system, and it produces very long roots, like it goes to more than 6 feet. The roots are more than 6 feet, so it spreads in the inside the water, and those rooting system are actually helping in taking up the pollutant. So whatever, if you want to choose another plant, you have to see to it it should have a very good rooting system, because ultimately the roots are the root part of the plant is the are actually doing the work. It is not the shoot part, it is actually the root part which is taking up the pollutant and trying to degrade the pollutant.
So necessarily, a couple of things to keep in mind that the roots are some significantly deeper roots, fibrous. Perhaps also have. I mean, the plant has to be much more robust in terms of sustaining itself in hopefully different types of pollutants. So I guess so my question actually on that was, right. I mean, obviously, nobody. I don't think you can patent natural systems like a plant or something. But is there a possibility of actually creating intellectual property out of this particular technology or this, say, use of this particular plant? I mean, just a thought on it, perhaps.
Per se, we cannot patent on the plant as such, but we can patent the system. If we use a particular type of bacteria, which we show that bacteria has attached to the roots, because actually I didn't go into the technical details of how this remediation takes place. The remediation takes place both with the help of the roots as well as the bacteria. The bacteria, microorganisms, they basically go and attach to the roots, and both microbes and the roots of the plant, they together they try to remediate. So this system can be patented instead of, I mean, the plant cannot be patented, but the system, what we can make, that can be a unique system, and that system can be patented.
Great. I mean, best wishes to you to perhaps come up with this patent down the line.
Thank you.
And Romil, I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Samir. And thank you everyone for attending this 1 month of sessions. In this 1 month, what we have found as organizers, that we've got a group of professionals, about 30 people have regularly been attending and regularly been interacting with us. And we hope that this is going to be a platform for exchange of ideas and developing strategies to face and this crisis that is happening at a national level and also at an international level. But at a national level, we are really facing this crisis of water and clean water. And I'm thankful to everyone, and I look forward to your interaction, your suggestions, how we can take this dialogue ahead. May I kindly request everyone to switch on the camera so we can take, in the modern age, what is called as a group photograph of all the participants here. Our tech man tells me that we can take a group photograph, which of course we will post on our website and on the Bombay University website, where you can have a look at it and take. So may I request everyone to kindly switch on their camera just for a minute so that we can have a group photograph, please. And of course, your best smile is also very important.
Absolutely.
Swapnil, are we doing this photograph?
Yes, we are, but I'm waiting for a few more to switch on their cameras, please, so that
yeah.
we can do that.
Excellent. Everyone is here, and
Yes, I'm looking forward to all of you who participated. No, all of you to please switch on your cameras so that we can take your photographs.
excellent. So, Swapnil, please go ahead. I think we've got most of the
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
A few are camera shy, so we can forgive them for that.
Sure. All right, one more. All right, I'll on the count of 3, 3, 2, 1, smile.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We look forward, and please feel free to connect with us and ask us questions, and we can always support each other in this big challenge that history has put before us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.